What is good, y'all? Welcome to another edition of the Liberty Cast. I'm your host, Big E. I hope everyone had a great made-up Hallmark holiday. This week is going to be probably a little shorter in content than it has been lately because despite the fact that it's a made-up holiday, Queen Bee still made some requests that required that I spend a little less time preparing and recording the show than normal, and that's perfectly fine. But we're going to talk about the disarmament primary as usual and where we are with the front runners, including Creepy Joe, who is descending rapidly into senility. And I don't say that mockingly. I mean, it's actually kind of sad to watch. The Second Amendment from the disarmament primary and everyone on the left is under attack. And they treat it as a second tier right, not even a right, as a privilege, and we'll talk about that as well. We'll also expand on something that I mentioned last week, and that is some of the differences between the left and the right, and how that plays out in the media. And then we'll talk about Ayanna Pressley and her ridiculous speech on the House floor. We'll get into all of that and a whole lot more straight ahead. So the disarmament primary season is in full swing, and as of now, Bernie and surprisingly Mayor Pete are on top, followed by Klobuchar, Warren, and Biden. Now, I told y'all a while ago, Biden was done. His campaign just didn't know it yet. Pretty sure they know it now, but we'll talk about him a little bit later. But Warren, she's going to be dropping out shortly too. She canceled all of her ad reservations in Nevada and South Carolina, which to me is a signal that suggests that by the time this show posts or shortly thereafter, she'll be out. Now, like I said, I knew early on that Biden was done, despite how much the left really wants him in there, which is kind of curious to me because he's never even really sniffed the presidency on his own. He was bounced out of the race in 1988 for a plagiarism, where he plagiarized a speech from, or actually I think it was a commercial from the UK Labour Party candidate who was challenging Margaret Thatcher at the time, Neil Kinnock. And that's just the most famous one because there are other instances where he lifted parts of speeches from Robert and John F. Kennedy. But just as an illustration, check this out.
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university?
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
No, it's not because they weren't as smart. It's not because they didn't work as hard. It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent or the strength or the endurance or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
Pretty egregious, is it not? But just Google Joe Biden plagiarism and you'll get all of the examples of where he lifted speeches and things of that nature. But it also came out during that campaign that he plagiarized a paper in his first year of law school. And I mean, he was at the bottom of his class in law school. So I mean, despite all his apparent success, and looks can be deceiving, but the guy is pretty much as unimpressive as it gets. But they wanted him because they believed he had the best chance to beat Donald Trump. And on paper, that may have been true. Maybe. But he came in fifth in New Hampshire. He can't stop telling people not to vote for him or calling his supporters names.
Iowa's a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced Tony soldier. You said you were, but now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you.
I mean, the campaign played it off as a joke, and some people in the audience laughed. But come on. I mean, how often can you do that and still retain the support of your constituents or of your voters? But anyway, now two socialists are leading the disarmament primary, Bernie and the mayor. Now I know they're trying to tell us that Pete is a moderate, but he's not. He's far from it. I mean, he won a national essay contest where he praised Bernie Sanders as one of his heroes. And he is painfully awkward around black folks. Here he is talking to Charlemagne the God at a forum in South Carolina, focusing on outreach to the black community and entrepreneurship and things like that.
So there are things we can and should do right away that can deal with black money, dark money.
African American money.
I'm always happy to take black money contributions into my campaign. Dark money refers to when you can't identify the funding that goes into these super PACs.
That was, and if you watch the video, the look on his face, he wants to get out of there so bad. But then he compounds the ridiculousness with explaining to people what dark money is. Like, come on. They know what dark money is. People know what dark money is. People who don't know what dark money is are probably not going to be in that venue listening to you and asking questions. It's just it's just sad. He's enjoying a nice push right now by virtue of his showing in New Hampshire, but he's going to falter in North Carolina, and he's got no shot. And then we have Amy Klobuchar, who is also not a moderate, despite what the left would have us think. But she's got a bit of momentum now after doing better than expected in New Hampshire. We'll see how that goes. We'll see who Warren supporters back once she drops out, because like I said, that's coming. But I'm interested to see who she'll endorse after that. I mean, she can't endorse Bernie after calling him a sexist, can she? Anyway, if the economy keeps rolling the way it is, if President Trump keeps killing terrorists over there, there's really no shot any of these people have in November. All right, let's move on. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know, as far as the left is concerned, the Second Amendment it barely qualifies as a right. As far as they're concerned, it's not a right. It's a privilege. But have you noticed that all the people who want to take your guns away know very little, if anything, about guns or the Second Amendment? We've played some of that sound before, but do y'all remember this?
This is a ghost gun. This right here has ability with a .30 caliber clip to disperse with 30 bullets within half a second.
That was California State Senator Kevin DeLeon beclowning himself to an extraordinary degree. I think that was the first time I realized just how little these people knew. That was when it crystallized for me just how ignorant these people are when it came to guns. And then there was Mark Levine in Virginia, which was just as bad. It may not have sounded that bad to some people, but if you have the slightest knowledge or experience with guns, listening to that was nauseating. But then we're going back to old Sleepy Joe. He gets up in Hudson, New Hampshire at one of his events and spews about 7 minutes worth of cringe-inducing twaddle that was just ridiculous. And I will play that audio for you on the other side of this quick break. So this what I'm about to play for you is only about a minute and a half, a little longer than we usually play, but it's about a minute and a half out of that 7-minute answer that he gave to someone who asked a question about gun safety. I was going to do more to set this up, but you know what? Just listen.
There is a Second Amendment, and you do have a right to bear arms, but not an unlimited right. No amendment is absolute. I own a 20 gauge and a 10 gauge shotgun. I just skeet shoot. I don't even hunt. My sons are hunters. They bird hunt. You know, we protect, by the way, geese crossing the international boundary more than we do people. You only have three shells in your shotgun if you're going goose hunting. Okay, but you can have 100 rounds in a magazine that you can buy today. So I'm the only person who's ever beat the NRA nationally. I beat them flat out twice. I'm the guy that got the Brady bill passed. That is the background check bill. The Constitution doesn't say anybody can own a weapon. It says only certain people can own weapons. If you are incapable of thinking, or you're mentally ill, you can't own a weapon. If you're a terrorist, you can't own a weapon. You shouldn't be able to own a weapon if you're an abuser, so on and so forth. There's never been a limit on that anybody could own a weapon, period. No, and by the way, those who say the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots, a great line. Well, guess what? The fact is, if you're going to take on the government, you need an F-15 with Hellfire missiles. There's no way an AK-47 is going to take care of you if you're going to take on. You're worried about the government coming down, knocking down your door.
There was so much wrong with that, and that was just part of that entire answer. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Nowhere in there does it say anything about hunting. Nowhere. And his nonsense about the 100-round magazine. The shooter at Virginia Tech used pistols and killed 33 people. The highest number of rounds his magazines held was 17. But most of the ones he had were 10-round magazines and still managed to kill 33 people. The shooters at Columbine fired a total of 37 shotgun shells. The weapon that Joe Biden seems to be so fond of. Come on. Then Biden talks about beating the NRA twice. Okay. One of these supposed instances that he beat the NRA refers to the 1994 assault weapons ban, which that law has sunset now, and he still counts that as a win somehow. Okay, fine. Whatevs. But the second thing he mentions is the Brady bill, the background check bill. But if that was such a big win, why is everyone on the left, clamoring for more background checks? Seems to me that if the background check bill that he got passed was such a win, that should be the end of it, shouldn't it? So these quote-unquote wins are not really wins at all. And this one is just an absolute bold-faced lie. The Constitution, in fact, does say everyone can own a weapon. It's all the other ridiculous laws that have been put in place over the years that restrict that right. And in some cases, obviously, that's necessary. But in most cases, shall not be infringed. But there are close to 30,000, if not over 30,000, extra constitutional gun laws on the books at the federal and state levels. Not to mention all the different municipalities. Shall not be infringed, though, sounds pretty absolute to me. Now, I saw a couple of stories this week that really got me thinking about how the left believes that the right to bear arms is not even a right, rather a privilege. In fact, a state congresswoman in Massachusetts, Representative Marjorie Decker, actually said in 2017 that it is a privilege that we allow individuals to hold onto something that causes harm and death. It is a privilege to have a car license. It is a privilege to have a gun license. First of all, it's a driver's license, but details. Imagine if President Trump or some conservative had said car license. Anyway, it would be all over CNN. Lemon Juice would be all caught up in a fit of laughter, whatever. But like I said, there were a couple of stories that that brought that back, for me anyway. One of them was a story in Illinois where the director of the Illinois State Police basically wants to treat law-abiding gun owners as criminals. On top of the firearm owner's identification card that gun owners have to buy in order to purchase guns in the state of Illinois, they're going to raise, first of all, he's going to raise that fee from $10, I believe it was, to $30, which is significant. But then he wants to require that anyone purchasing a handgun or anyone purchasing a gun, a firearm, has to get fingerprinted. So on top of the federal requirements that are already in place, they have a state firearms owner identification card that you have to get, and now they want your fingerprints. What part of shall not be infringed do these people not get? Now, we've said for a long time that the left used to at least pay lip service to not wanting to take your guns. But now, since Robert Francis came out and said, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, the dam just broke loose. And now they have shifted so far to the left. Well, they haven't really shifted because they've always been there, but now they're just openly admitting it. But they are so far on the left of this that part of their rationale is if you don't agree with them, then you want kids to die. And according to Mike Bloomberg, if you own a gun, if you have a gun in your home, you're stupid. In an interview with the Rolling Stone back in 2014, he said, quote, "If you want to have a gun in your house, I think you're pretty stupid, particularly if you have kids. But I guess you have the right to do that." I mean, I could do a whole show about all the dumb stuff that Bloomberg has said with regard to gun control over the years, but we'll save that for another time. And of course, this really should not come as any surprise to any of us. As far as the left is concerned, the only people who need guns are the people who protect the ruling class and the government, the police. But I bet you there are some lefties who think we need to follow the British model, and even the police shouldn't carry firearms. I remember when I was a kid being really confused when I learned that British cops wore those stupid custodian helmets and didn't carry firearms. I mean, I wanted to be a cop back then and played cops and robbers with my friends, and cops carrying guns was just how it was. And the fact that the British cops didn't have guns was super confusing to me. But the left probably wants that. And just imagine if our cops didn't carry guns. Darren Wilson probably would be dead, and Michael Brown would be alive right now. I mean, we have police officers dying at a horrifically high rate as it is. If only the criminals had guns, can you imagine the carnage in the streets? Of course, given the left's attitude towards the police and guns, how long do you think it's really going to be before some nitwit lawmaker like Swalwell proposes something so ridiculous? Oh, come on. I know some of you are thinking, no, Biggie, come on, that's just ridiculous. Okay. Did you think 5 years ago there would be states that would allow a woman to abort her child as it's crowning? Or have legislation that requires doctors to try and save the lives of babies born alive after a botched abortion get voted down? Yet here we are. So please spare me the "that would never happen" nonsense. Another thing that's been on my mind lately, and we talked about it a bit also last week, and that is the difference between conservatives and leftists. And when we talked about it last week, it was related to how the different groups react to tragedy or bad news with members of the other group. But there are other differences. And I'm sure a number of you already understand this, but maybe there are some of you that need to have this, that maybe this will crystallize it for you even more. But some of the other differences: conservatives value the individual. We respect individual rights. We value personal responsibility, which is one of the big reasons why the Second Amendment is so important, because it embodies both of those aspects. the right to protect yourself, the right to protect your family and your property against those who would do you harm, like the government. But taking that responsibility on yourself rather than outsourcing it to that same government that would oppress you if you didn't have the ability to protect yourself. The left, on the other hand, values the collective. They believe that the government should be responsible for your safety, your security, your health, and happiness. Well, maybe I don't think they give a rat's ass about your happiness, but you get the idea. It's a top-down philosophy. The government is the provider. And we just need to be compliant and accept that they are this benevolent entity from which everything flows. And if you notice, everything they believe or espouse kind of has a religious tinge to it. Think about what I just said. They're the benevolent provider from which everything flows. That's God. But that's how the left thinks of government. It's something to be worshipped. Whereas conservatives, we favor a bottom-up approach. And we'll talk about what that means on the other side of this break. So we were talking about some of the differences between the left and the right in their approaches, their philosophies, and how the left has a top-down approach while the conservatives have a bottom-up approach. Conservatives believe that the individual, left to their own devices, is free to succeed or fail. There's an equal opportunity for everyone. Whereas the left, they want equal outcomes. And because they favor the collective, because they believe in grouping people based on their skin color, ethnic identity, sexual orientation, whatever the case may be, I mean, aside from their authoritarian bent, identity politics is their stock and trade. They define people by their group identity rather than their individual identity. And because of that, no one in the group is allowed to disagree. There are no dissenting opinions, no free thinkers, only people nodding in bovine agreement with whatever ridiculous collectivist socialist policies they come up with. This is why they are always in lockstep with each other. This is why there is hardly a difference in any of the disarmament primary candidates. Every last one of them is a radical socialist, including Bloomberg. I know he was a Republican. He governed New York as a Republican, or he won the mayor's office as a Republican. He switched from that to independent and to Democrat. But he's just as radical a socialist as the rest of them. But Big E, how can you possibly think that when he's a billionaire worth several times the net worth of President Trump? Well, it's easy. He only ran as a Republican because he knew that was the path of least resistance to become mayor of New York. Granted, he did continue a lot of Giuliani's policies in terms of policing and keeping New York safe, keeping it among the safest cities in the country. And that's fantastic. But you don't limit the size of a soda that somebody can buy. You don't put restrictions on menus in restaurants. You don't do that if you're a free market capitalist. You only do that if you're a radical socialist, communist even, under the guise of doing those things in the interest of public health or something. Every last one of the disarmament primary candidates is dangerous, but it's not just the candidates individually that are dangerous. It's their philosophy as a whole. And their philosophy as a whole is always going to produce more and more radical candidates. And as long as they're allowed to continue to indoctrinate children with their ridiculous socialist philosophies, this is something we're going to be fighting from now until. But if you think I'm wrong, please let me know. I would love to hear a counter to that. I absolutely welcome that discussion. So please hit me up and let's have that discussion. All right, there are a couple of other things I want to get to before we get you out of here. First of which, Ayanna Pressley, squad member Ayanna Pressley, Democrat representative from Massachusetts, got up on the House floor and used her time to carp about equal rights.
The great poet and pioneer of righteous rage, Audre Lorde, once said, quote, "I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when our shackles are very different from my own," end quote. The year is now 2020, and here we women are, still in so many ways, not fully free, still shackled. Today, I rise to affirm the humanity and the dignity of all women. I rise in strong, unapologetic, righteous support of H.J. Res. 79, which will strike the arbitrary deadline for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, an amendment that should already be the law of the land.
Women are not free? Still shackled? What is she talking about? What rights do women not enjoy that men do? And think about this just for a second. She is a black woman making this speech on the floor of the House of Representatives as a member of the so-called squad, which itself is comprised of herself and 3 other women of color. So what was her point? I mean, she was expressing her support for removing the deadline for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. But it was a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea then, and even worse now. Through the efforts of Phyllis Schlafly, she pretty much single-handedly defeated that amendment. And let's just say that in 1972, maybe it would have been a good idea. It wouldn't have been, but let's just say for argument's sake that it would have been. Does anybody really think that the conditions in 1972 are in any way compared to what's going on right now? Women graduate from college at a higher rate than men do now. Women obtain advanced degrees at a higher rate than men do now. And when you adjust for the time off that women take to have children and raise families, women earn more money than men do. The wage gap is actually in the other direction. And that wage gap has nothing to do with fairness. It has to do with the fact that women graduate college and obtain advanced degrees at a higher rate than men do. So they are more valuable to their employers. So they're going to earn more money. I mean, this is not difficult. Unless, of course, you're a leftist. Anyway, one last quick thing before we get you out of here. And this is going to be more of a feel-good story than our normal show endings with all the stupidity that gets spewed from the left. But in Bartow County, Georgia, a young man by the name of Noah Woods woke up about a week or so ago to find his bedroom on fire. He grabbed his 2-year-old sister and got her out of the house through the window. And there are conflicting reports. Some say he got her out and then went back in to grab the dog. Some say he grabbed her and the dog and got out at the same time. Regardless, once he and his sister and the dog got out, he then alerted his family, and everyone was able to get out of that house alive. One detail I did forget to mention, though. Noah Woods is 5 years old. Yeah. There are adults that can't remain calm in a situation like that. And yet this kid managed to save his entire family. He was treated for minor burns and released, but all 9 of his family members are alive. And the Bartow County Fire Department is planning on presenting him with a life-saving award and making him an honorary Bartow County firefighter. Hats off to you, young Noah. I suspect that there are going to be some great things in your future. All right, y'all, that's our show. I want to thank you all for spending this time with me this week. I want to thank all of you for helping the show grow. We did the best numbers that we've done ever this past week. So thank you for that. keep spreading the word, keep getting the message out so that we can defeat the socialist scourge in November, because that's exactly what it is. But please look for us on your favorite podcast platform, whatever that may be. If we're not on your favorite one, let us know and we'll do whatever we can to get set up on that platform for you. But please find us, subscribe, leave a review, and share the message. And of course, we're also on social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Parlay. It's at the LibertyCast on all 4 platforms. But again, folks, thank you all for listening and sharing the message. And as usual, until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.